Welcome back to the 250th episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, including how the Israel conflict is a little bit more complicated than the Biden administration wants to let on, how the Abraham Accords and this era of Biden is actually a flip-flop that won't be good for the Middle East, and then an article talking about why the right can't fight like the left. And of course, we will end today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. Now, that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump in to a different segment. We're going to try it out again. This one is Dip, Dive, Dodge, and now we're going to have a new intro for it. Let's get ready to dip, dive, and dodge. So, now that you're back after that beautiful little intro, let's jump right into it. For those who don't know, this is a game that we're going to be doing where I have ChatGPT that gives me two different policy proposals and then a self-promotion, and I have to pivot from the first policy proposal that is asked to me in the form of a question. I'll pretend to be a reporter. And then I have to get to the topic that I actually want to talk about, that I was told before going out on stage, hey, this is what you really need to hit today, while also getting a little bit of the self-promotion in there. So I'm going to lay out both of the topics for you real quick, and then I'll pose the question to myself and get that self-promotion in there. So topic number one, it's advocate for the implementation of workforce development tax credits for businesses that provide on-the-job training programs. And the second one is propose the establishment of a personal responsibility education program in schools focusing on teaching financial literacy. And then the self-promotion is a blog exploring the timeless wisdom found in classical literature and philosophy. In the future, I may not tell you what the self-promotion is, and we'll just see if you can figure it out. But for right now, I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. When we start this segment out, we did it once before, but let's jump into how the reporter would ask the question. I'm going to say that I'm a senator from the great state of Texas. Ted Cruz, I'm coming for your job. So the reporter comes up and says, so, Mr. Smith, you're obviously a big proponent who has been working here on different workforce deployment issues within the state of Texas. And we recently saw legislation proposed by the State House about having workforce development credits for these different businesses that actually provide these on-the-job training. This would be akin to the government giving these different areas or different sectors money in order to provide these sort of trainings to their workforce. Would you like to see an increase in the amount of spending within your state for these sort of programs? Well, thank you, good sir. I do, of course, represent this great state of Texas, and we have many vibrant workers, and a lot of these workers have been working hard for years upon years in order to benefit their families, to grow their prospects, and these on-the-job trainings are crucial, and we love to see businesses actually practice these sort of things. But what's really important to see that these families make it out of these industries, they make it into retirement, they have enough money in the bank, is we need to be providing crucial financial training to them in their younger years. For the longest time, we have talked about implementing some sort of personal responsibility or financial literacy classes in high school educations, and I actually am putting a bill forward in the Senate to get this to be not just something that happens in Texas, but that can benefit every single person across this nation. And another thing that we normally explore in these high schools that we've kind of fallen off on, we've started to ban these different books, whether it be To Kill a Mockingbird, some of these classic, or Mark Twain, some of these classic books. We need to start talking about these classical works of literature and get them back into the zeitgeist. And that's why I want to talk to you about my blog. We actually call it Wisdom for the Ages. And we explore all these old literary figures, all these old literary books that inspired the Western movement, that inspired the development of our philosophy. And we want to put these back in schools just like I want to put financial training in every single high school. So every single person, once they get out there in the world, they know how to invest, they know how to save, and they can lock in these gains from their years of developing a career at these businesses. So thank you so much for your question. I hope you have a wonderful day. So you can see it went a little bit long here today, but honestly, I think that was a pretty good pivot. Then again, the topics weren't so far off. I'm going to try to rework the AI so that we can actually get some more out of the blue kind of proposals. But I'll tell you now, the self-promotion was definitely a weird one. We were able to spin it pretty well, but at the end of the day, I don't think that's a normal thing that you're out there promoting. I don't think a lot of people are going to be really interested in that, but hey, I could very well be wrong. So with the game out of the way, let's jump into our articles. So our first one that we talked about actually comes from the Intercept, and the headline reads, Israel conflict spreads to 16 nations as Biden admin says there's no war. So you can tell where the Intercept is definitely coming from. And the reason that we're talking about Israel is because I woke up really, really early this morning, and I saw the news. I was trying to pick a new podcast to fall asleep to, and I was like, oh shoot, this says there's an attack on Israel from Iran. That's a huge escalation. So I actually held off for most of the day to see some of the things that came in. I read these articles a little bit later. There wasn't as much coverage from the people that I would like to see coverage from. Some of your more independent podcasts. There was, Fox News, CNBC, MSNBC, all these different news organizations were covering it throughout the course of the day, and I listened to some of their coverage, but there wasn't much revelatory stuff. Most of the commentary was like, oh, well, we mainly stopped it. The U.S. was involved, and they had a large group of different nations that were getting involved. So when I read this Intercept article, I was like, okay, wow. So it's actually a lot of different people that are on a whole bunch of different sides of what's going on here. So let's go straight into the first paragraph so we can get a little bit of context for what the Intercept is talking about here. Quote, the regional war in the Middle East now involves at least 16 different countries and includes the first strikes from Iranian territories on Israel. But the United States continues to insist that there is no broader war, hiding the extent of American military involvement. And yet, in response to Iran's drone and missile attacks Saturday, the U.S. flew aircraft and launched air defense missiles from its at least 8 countries, while Iran and its proxies fired weapons from Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. So there we go. That's 9, or actually that's 11 of them right off the top of the article here, where they talk about Iraq, Syria, Yemen. Oh, wait, hold on. No, that's actually Iran as well. So guess what? That's 4 plus 8. Now we're at 12. And then 8 of the countries that the U.S. was involved in. So there are a lot of different nations that are getting involved here. Now, let's be clear. Technically, some of these nations that they're listing as the U.S. working out of aren't doing anything themselves. They're just allowing the U.S. to have bases there. I'm pretty sure the Intercept would say that's a semantic argument. At the end of the day, they have to allow America to be there. Therefore, they are involved in this conflict. That doesn't mean, as the headline may suggest, that they are actually out there siding with Israel. They're not deploying their own resources. They're just letting the U.S. deploy its resources. But there is some sort of tacit agreement there, some sort of tacit allyship. So yes, to some degree, they actually are involved in what's going on across the Middle East. So why is this important? Why does the Intercept want to talk about this? Besides the fact that the Biden administration, they're claiming, and the wider defense department, industry, whatever you want to name it, the military industrial interest, whatever, they are saying that at the end of the day, no, it's not as big of a deal. No, it's just the Houthis in Yemen who are working at Iran's behest. It's just Hezbollah who's working at Iran's behest. Oh no, it's just Hamas who's working with Iran. No. This is not a broader thing. This is just Iran being Iran, which is, one, the fact that Iran's pressuring through these different proxy groups, and let's be clear, these proxy groups do have some agency. They're obviously funded by Iran, and they probably do work with them in some strategic capacity in order to say, hey, maybe we could coordinate something like they had done with the attack on Israel. I do believe it was coordinated with Hezbollah and Yemen, sending things over. And let's be clear, maybe they were separate attacks, but the Intercept definitely mentions the fact that a U.S. aircraft shot down some things, and an aircraft carrier was also involved in shooting down some of the things that would have come from Hezbollah or coming from Yemen. So I would assume that this was at least semi-coordinated, unless they just said, oh, Iran's firing things off. Hey, let's just fire things off. But they do have some autonomy on how things get planned out. So it's not like Iran is on the ground there saying, you will do this absolutely 100%, but they're definitely backed by them, so we can't ignore that. But then you also have the United States in the same region, saying, hey, Britain, I want you to get involved in here. Hey, Jordan, we want you to actually do a little bit of shooting down Saudi Arabia. Hey, can we launch our aircraft from some of your bases? Oh, we're going to put an aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean and then also around the Red Sea, so we'll be able to intercept some of these missiles and drones. So it's obviously a very wide-ranging conflict, and what they're pointing out is saying, no, okay, America's basically denying this. America's out there saying, no, it's not a broader war. These are just some incidences. These are just things that are happening from rebel groups, and it's not Iran. And now Iran has directly attacked. They did say that they thought the issue was concluded as a response to the attack on their consulate in Syria, but now Iran has directly gotten involved. It's no longer just using its proxy groups. So you could say this is an escalation to war. And I would agree with the Intercept if they follow that sort of logic. And I think even the mainstream establishment would also follow along that line. I mean, there were people asking the question today, is this technically a war? Is Israel going to respond like it's a war? I also saw some commentators saying, oh, well, is Israel intercepted most of them? They should just ignore them. And they should just say, hey, at the end of the day, you didn't really do anything. You're not worth our time spending energy on, which is an interesting argument. I think it actually, for that person's particularly, it may be a downplay, which is Israel, don't go any further. It will actually hurt your public opinion, but they're not going to say that online. So they're just like, no, just ignore them. I think that could be a cope. Then again, I don't know the person personally. I'm not going to call them out either because I don't think that's actually going to be productive. It's not going to get anybody anywhere. But these sort of arguments are very interesting to talk about. And the fact that the U.S. is not acknowledging that this is a wide-ranging issue. Now, there are multiple nations involved on every single side, and this is basically a Middle East Cold War, or Middle East, I mean, now it's not a Cold War anymore. It's a Middle East showdown. The reason this is important to acknowledge it is we have to be realistic about what is happening. If the message keeps going out that this is not a war where we have people on the ground in all these different areas, and I'm not saying that, hey, America is directly implicated and that we have boots on the ground. I'm not trying to imply that. But if we're not at least realistic about the situation on the ground and how there's this constant back and forth and firing and how it appears to be a war, and then American troops get hurt, then the question for the people who don't know what the situation is actually like, they're like, why did our American people get hurt? Did Iran actually intentionally attack our people there on the ground? Well, you could say from Iran's perspective, we're actually directly involved shooting some of these things down. We also have a whole bunch of people across the region, and they may be interfering in Iran's things, or they may just be the accidental side effects of some of Iran's processes. And if people aren't fully aware of the involvement that we have there, then they will not be as willing to say at the end of the day, oh, we brought this on. They're just going to believe the talking point, which is, oh, we were attacked, versus, yes, we were attacked, but it's because we were helping defend Israel, because we were getting more involved in this Middle Eastern process. We were in 8 different countries deploying from them. So the likelihood of it goes up. So you can't make that argument that, hey, maybe we shouldn't have been in those places, or, you kind of brought this on by being there. It's like the argument of, hey, your bully's going to be somewhere tonight. And I'm not saying Iran's our bully. I'm not saying we're a bully, but just the analogy that a person you want to avoid is going to be there tonight and you show up there anyway. I'm not saying you're asking for it. I'm not saying you deserve to be hit, but upon review from the past, you may say, hey, maybe I shouldn't have gone there and it wouldn't have happened. So if we're not fully aware of where we are, of how we're interacting in this war, of what the actual nature of it is, then it's easier for the pill to go down, which is the Intercept's perspective, because they're definitely anti-war. They're really, I don't want to say really progressive, but they're pretty darn progressive. So they're definitely saying, hey, no, we don't want to be involved in this at all. And the fact that people don't know the full breadth will make it easier for them to swallow the pill. And just like we went in during the early 2000s, because, not everybody has a deep understanding of Saddam Hussein and his weapons of mass destruction claim. They don't understand what's going on across all of the Middle East. They don't have a full understanding of what we were doing there before anyway. So they can't even really protest when this information gets put down on the ground or thrown into the society. They can't actually defend against it. It's like a virus. It's a virus that we don't have antibodies for because we don't have the knowledge to be actually prepared for the virus coming in, so our body's not able to fight it as well. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily propaganda or anything like that, but let's be clear, the media can fall in line, the government can push its line very hard, and we could very well see it escalating if we're not careful. And the more people are informed, the Intercept argument would go, the more people that are informed, the less likely we are to haphazardly go into something or to do it half-baked, essentially. At least that's what I took away from their article, and I think it has the best of intentions. I don't think they're just anti-Biden, because I think there's some things on I would say they're anti-establishment, anti-power. At the end of the day, they are going to question the people that are in power, whether you like it or not, whether they like their policies or not. And sometimes the Intercept, I don't like the perspective they take. Sometimes I do. I've used their reporting before. It can be very lengthy, but I would suggest you go read the entire article. I am switching things up. I don't have the folders that I normally have because I'm running out of storage on the news website where I normally create the folders. So I have included individual links, meaning that you may have a harder time reading some of them, but I would definitely take the time to go down to the links in the description below the like and subscribe button and actually click on it. Yes, I know, I just did the like and subscribe. I do that all the time at the end, so it's kind of just ingrained. But while you're down there, if you found this, the segment on the game fun, if you found this informative, or at least it brought you to this article, and you want to give it a like, you want to give it a subscribe, go down there. If not, dislike it and leave a comment. Unsubscribe, leave a comment. Unsubscribe, dislike without doing anything. Never mind, we're getting too lost on that. The point being, it's a new link system. Each one will be labeled individually, so you can go down there, click it, and read the entire thing. So, our next article comes from commentary.org. Israel-Arab normalization proves its worth. So, this is obviously an article from the other side of the aisle, because I don't think anybody on the left will really praise the Abraham Accords. They'll probably say, well, it was actually a heap of nothing, didn't change much. And then people on the right would say that it actually provided the door, it provided the permission slip for everybody who was kind of on the fence about normalizing things with Israel, the opportunity to do so. So why is commentary.org saying this is actually a good thing overall? Let's just read. I don't want to read the first paragraph because they're kind of just giving the background of what happened on Saturday night. We've already been over that. But here's the argument that they're getting at. Quote, the fundamental fact remains. There was a ceasefire in place on October 6th. Iran, via its proxies, shattered that ceasefire on October 7th. So the thing that I was saying here is Hamas has agency, and whether or not you agree or disagree, Iran said at the beginning of this that they were not directly involved in the planning of October 7th. I have not seen comments to the contrary since then, and that's probably because they do not want to take direct, and they're already getting blamed, but they don't want to have an easy lane for Israel to criticize and possibly attack them on. So the authors here are making a jump, and let's be clear, we're almost 100% certain more than actually 100% certain that Iran's at least funding them. And we know for a fact that there is some intermingling of the minds there. But like I was establishing earlier, these different organizations do have agency. So to directly say Iran, via its proxies, shattered that ceasefire, I'm not saying it's not 100% factual. I think that at the end of the day, it is pushing of a very, it's the framing of it in a very specific way versus saying Hamas, who does receive funding and training from Iran. That's just a factual way to put it. The framing matters a little bit, especially when you're just reading over this very blasé. But at the end of the day, the people who are really anti-Iran will look at me and be like, Alex, there's no difference. Get over it, and that's fair. You know what? There's very little difference there. But I do think the framing matters, especially for the lay reader or lay listener. Quote, and the events of this weekend are part of the very same conflict that followed. The Iranian barrage on Israel cannot be separated from the ongoing war in Gaza. Compartmentalization is not an option. Every front in this conflict was opened by Tehran, and the West cannot long afford to let the Iranians continue to set the parameters of the war. Okay, interesting. So was Israel's attack on the consulate in Syria a direct response to Gaza and Iran? Yeah, you could say yes, you could say no. They probably would have at least thought about attacking the consulate or attacking this official, one of the highest ranking military members in Iran, before October 7th, but they definitely cemented it when October 7th happened, and they were trying to deter Iran from providing more money and training to these organizations. So you could do that little game and link it all back to Iran. I think you need to explain that a little bit more, because Iran is responding here. This attack is responding to Israel violating the international customary law that you do not attack anybody in basically an embassy building. Now, there will be contentions that, well, it's not actually the main embassy, it's a consulate, it's next to it, so on and so forth. Now, at the end of the day, this is supposed to be protected territory, it's supposed to be off limits, and Israel attacked them anyway. So, Iran's saying it's a response to that. So you could argue, if you do let's limit the time frame thing, where we say, if we only look within this period to this period, if we only look at from the time right before that consulate attack happened and then on to Saturday, then no, actually this was provoked by Israel. If you want to expand the timeline, then you could say, well, no, it's actually something that they did because of actions of the people that were involved in the October 7th attack. And then the thing is, if we just keep expanding the window that we're looking through, eventually we're going to go back to the old Palestine-Israel conflict. We're going to go the Sunni-Shiite Israel. We're going to go so many different ways that it's not going to be practical. I think the best way to look at it is the direct cause and effect. So we know the effect of the consulate attack was Iran's attack, okay? We know that direct cause and effect. And do we know the direct cause and effect of the attack on the consulate? Maybe it's a few different factors. Maybe they just want to send a message to Iran. Maybe it's the Hamas thing. I don't know. I don't think we have that information. So to exclude the fact that this is a response on Iran's part and how they justified it is based on the consulate attack. And to provide no other information about the consulate attack or the rationale that Israel had put out there besides the fact that they wanted to take out a high-level Iranian military leader, I think that's irresponsible. And I think they're not covering the full breadth of it. Now, does that not mean that at the end of the day, this could be stopped? Because that's where the commentary.org is going to go. Because what they say next, quote, yet despite all the questions that remain unanswered in the immediate wake of this weekend's attack, the nature of the Western response does tell us something important about the world we are living in today and the one we have left behind. So they go on to give a history deal, but here's what I really want to get to. Quote, in the end, Israel has its fire but won itself no favors with the Bush administration, and doing so leaving a sour taste in many Israelis' mouth. Fast forward to 2024, and we read that a report in the Times of Israel, Jordanian jets downed dozens of Iranian drones flying across northern and central Jordan, heading to Israel, two regional security sources said in a dramatic show of support from Amman, which has heavily criticized Israel's prosecution of the war against Hamas in Gaza. So what they're getting at is the fact that this is not a defense project that was just done by one nation. It's not something where it was just Israel or the United States. This was a multilateral defense project put together that had bases in other Arab nations that were helping defend Israel against Iran. And what they're saying here is normalization with Israel can work. It can be beneficial, especially if you want to be a bulwark. And let's be clear, they don't outline this directly in the article, but I think it's underlying it. They're basically saying, Iran, big problem. Iran, bad. And we want to have a block against them. We want to limit their power in the Middle East. And if that's the goal, which has been one of the stated goals of many administrations over the last 20 years, then having normalization with Israel is a good thing. I recommend going and reading the rest of this article because it does lay out a few crucial things. There are a few other things that I didn't directly cover. It goes into more of the history of the tensions within the Middle East and how this normalization is going to be even more beneficial. Go give it a read. It's a very interesting one for sure. So let's jump to our final article that comes from National Review, and the headline reads, "Why the Right Can Never Fight Like the Left." And before we really jump into this article, I want to ask you, what do you think the answer is? Because the answer that I've always heard from people on the right, and to some degree I've believed in myself at some points, is the right is more principled. That there are certain principles and dignities that they're going to hold to that the left just won't do. Then again, if you talk to some people on the left, they'll say they have principles, they have things that they're just going to stand by, that it's not just winning that they care about, and there are certain lines that the Republicans will just cross too. So at the end of the day, and let's be clear, they don't frame it as Republicans, Democrats here, they frame it as left, right, but let's just delve into where they're coming from or what they're talking about and get rid of those presuppositions because, never mind, you don't have to get rid of them because that's basically what they say, but let's hear it from National Review. Quote, "The right in America fights for different ends with different troops, so of course we tend to choose different means." Quote, "Why can't we fight the way they do? This is the eternal cry of the civilized man at war and policemen walking the beat and the political conservative. There's an answer, and it goes beyond the moral injunctions that we're better than they are or we shouldn't sink to their level. It's also this: we're fighting for different things with different people. So, of course, our methods must be different. The reasons are not only moral, but they are practical. They should be considered even by those who reject all the appeals to morality in politics," which is a very interesting way to frame it. And I think it's trying to get at something a little bit deeper here. And yes, while they agreed with the contention that, hey, we don't want to sink to their level, they are definitely pointing out here something else that goes along with it. I do think it's an important thing to bring up. The left would definitely say, would the left actually ever have a insurrection at the Capitol? Would they ever have a attempt to overthrow the election? That feels like something that only the right would do. The ultra nationalists, the people who believe in more authoritarian power. I think that even if you don't agree with the contention that it was an actual insurrection, or even if you agree that it could be considered an insurrection, but it had no means of actually succeeding anyway, so it doesn't actually matter. Whatever your opinion is that would be anti the point that it's an insurrection or something that's actually of import, like the left has made it. You could definitely point that out as something that the people who were there actually intended to do something differently than the left probably would have said they would do it, and therefore maybe the claim that we won't sink to their level or we wouldn't do things that way or we have a more moral principle may not 100% hold up. And then again, that is one example versus many of terrible, terrible examples on both sides. So let's actually go into this whole means and ends argument that they're going to propose here. Quote, in conflict, whether it be war, litigation, politics, or some other form of contest, you can't answer the question, how shall we fight, without first answering the question, what are we fighting for? It's not the ends that justify the means, although the ends always inform the justification of means. It's that the ends you seek dictate the means that can help you get there. So let's see what they say. The same is true in law. I don't actually care about the examples they're giving in specific cases. So the answer to the question, how should conservatives fight? Therefore, we should first ask, what are we fighting for? And what do conservatives and the right more broadly want from politics? There are a number of answers here. The first order goods that the political right seeks in society are to raise and support a family, to practice faith and raise children in that faith, and pursue a livelihood. Now, it is a little bit different than that, but that is the basic framing. And if those are the people that you're using to fight these wars, then I say wars very simply, let me put it a different way, to fight these battles. It's not the whole multiple wars, it's the battles within the war. Sure, the semantics are important. Then, of course, you're going to have a different way of going about it. I think it's a very interesting framing to look at it, and I think there's definitely a more deep conversation that could be had here. The reason I wanted to bring it up, or at least point it out, is because it goes a little bit deeper than the simply we're better people, the moral argument. And I think that this argument actually holds a little bit more weight than simply the better people argument, or at least it gives a better explanation of why things are the way they are and how they normally play out in U.S. politics. So, with that said, go read that one as well. I know I'm saying read them a lot. Then again, I try to say that with most articles. You should go and read these articles yourself and not just get the breakdown from me, but I'll provide what I can that I think is interesting from them. Then again, I'm more just commentating than trying to give you all of the crucial insights. I'm pulling out what I think is most important from them. So, and let's jump on to our last article, our Daily Delight. This one comes from Boing Boing. And the headline reads, I'd use tiny ice cream cones to hide pills from my dog. And honestly, this article feels like a promotion for a product, but it's just, honestly, it seems like a really cool product. It's an ice cream cone style treat. And when I say style, because it's the outside's a cone, but it's actually peanut butter on the inside. And you put the pill in there and you give it to your dogs. And the way this woman's dogs reacts to these things are absolutely adorable. If you want to see any of the photos, you want to get the product for yourself, you just want to see cute videos, there's a few promotional ones that I saw when I did a brief little thing. I don't know actually if they're promotional. They could just be people using them. Absolutely adorable. I just wanted to turn you on to this one real quick. So, with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Just kidding. Because if you want to check out any of today's articles, they'll all be in the link in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Google Podcasts, as well as Podfind. And the Twitter handle is down there at Your Daily Flip, where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. So now with all of that said, we can actually go to the outro, which is stay safe, don't die.